I would like first to thank you, ICT, for inviting me and to give me the opportunity to address this distinguished audience with the problem, the status of Al-Qaeda and the problem of global and local jihad. Should you have to oppose these two concepts, is it relevant to do so in a counter-terrorism perspective? Actually, this issue is a very important issue. It's a matter of fact that the Middle East is currently in a turmoil. Al-Qaeda in the Arabic Peninsula have planned in August to set a terrorist operation in Yemen and in other Arab countries, which pushed the United States to close 21 embassies across the Middle East and North Africa. During the same period, Iraq was shocked by a series of coordinated terrorist attacks in August, and more recently, on September 3rd, killing more than 100 people. According to the United Nations, this wave of bombing, which might spark off a new intense spiral of anti-religious violence between Shiite and Sunnite, resulted in roughly 800 deaths in August. Tunisia and Egypt were not spared from evils and rioting stemming from a political protest against the Muslim Brotherhood, accused of being willing to impose an Islamic regime. But in both countries, Al-Qaeda and its local associates, which took no part in the so-called Arab Spring, succeeded to take advantage of this political unrest to promote their terrorist agenda. In Tunisia, Ansar al-Sharia, a jihadi organization linked to Al-Qaeda, which is accused to be involved in the assassination, of two prominent figures of the opposition and to have set up an operational connections with a terrorist cell connected to AQIM. In Egypt, the army, in the wake of an unprecedented popular uprising in July against the regime which has not produced a democratic result, ousted the President Morsi and put in place an international government. Morsi supporters stormed the street in Cairo, and violent bloody clashes erupted in the whole country between the military forces and the Muslim Brotherhood. Likewise, in Tunisia, several Islamist terrorist movements affiliated to Al-Qaeda, operating mainly in the Sinai Peninsula, such as Al-Safi, Rafia, Jaida, or Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, benefited from these unstable situations to increase their jihadist strategy, targeting Egyptian military and police forces in the Sinai and firing rockets against Israel. In Syria, the situation is actually different. The rebel organizations are engaged in what appears as a civil war, battling to overthrow Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The main victim of this phase of bloody military confrontation is the civil population, which pays a heavy toll, especially after the August 21 chemical attack by the regime, which could ignite a wider war. In this dramatic context, terrorist organizations affiliated to Al-Qaeda have took over the rebellion, killing their leaders and carrying out a harsh crackdown on the military forces as well as on the civilians suspected to support the regime. The Al-Nusra Front and the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant are the main organizations. Both have claimed their allegiance to Al-Qaeda and are the most aggressive but also successful arm of the rebellion. One of the consequences of the Syrian civil war was to attract thousands of foreign jihadists over the world, especially coming from the European Union. All these fanatic followers of Al-Qaeda have joined Al-Nusra Front, but also the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, increasing their numbers and boosting their military capabilities. Such a situation poses a serious threat for the West and a political challenge on what should be done to support the rebels without providing these two terrorist groups with more military tools. The Libyan example was, for the Western countries, a nightmare after the dissemination of the stockpile of arms and ammunition of the former Gaddafi's arsenal in the Sahel area, which are looted by AQIM and other Islamic organizations and criminal gangs as well. These different situations concerning 4 Arab countries affected by the Islamic threat put in light the evolving outline and features of the terrorist organizations, networks, or cell linked to Al-Qaeda. The post-September 11 area has changed the face of the Islamic threat. Central Al-Qaeda is not anymore a structured organization with a central command headquarters, which should conceive and plan terrorist attacks to be carried out by local affiliates. The reality is much more complex and obeys to a collection of social, cultural, ethnical, political, or geopolitical data, some of them interacting with each other in an opportunistic or even a random way, making the phenomenon very difficult to grasp. This overview of the terrorist network linked to Al-Qaeda is the result of an operational experience we had, and I have personally in France, since the beginnings of the 90s with the Algerian GIA, the Islamist armed group. France is the first Western country to have experienced the Islamism threat inspired by Al-Qaeda, which targeted its interests abroad and within its borders as soon as in 1983. Do remember in the fall of 1994, a commander of the GIA hijacked an Air France scheduled flight in Algiers bound to Paris. But it has been demonstrated by evidence that the project was not a mere hijacking for ransom or political claim, but consisted in hurling the plane against the Eiffel Tower in Paris. That was the first attempt of the use of a commercial flight as a weapon of mass destruction 7 years before the September 11 attack in the United States. In 1995, the GIA embarked on a bloody terrorist attack in France, especially against the metro networks in Paris. It's important to recall briefly these remote terrorist events because, operationally speaking, there is no actual break between the former GIA and the current AQIM. The latter stems from the former, likewise the Salafist group for the preaching and fighting GSPC, which is the direct successor of the GIA. AQIM has only involved in its structures, its organization, its financial and logistics system, as well in its strategy. GIA and after 1996, the GSPC have set up in Europe, and especially in France, a loose conglomeration of jihadists mainly involved in financial and logistical activities. This loose conglomeration was formed of a set of small cell groups and networks scattered, polymorphous and mutating without any definite plan. The main task is the logistical and financial activities. To achieve this goal, they resorted to petty criminal practices such as fraud, theft, or drugs, and arms trafficking. This microfinancing system was very difficult to detect because it never used banks or financial institutions. However, it was efficient and profitable. For example, a network involving large scale of fake credit card trafficking have collected 200,000 euros in 1 month. But the linchpin of the Islamic backyard, which fueled the radicalization process and spurred into actions its member, is the so-called jihad land, the countries where Muslims are fighting non-Muslims or appear to be oppressed. The first one was Afghanistan. From 1994 to 2001, Afghanistan sucked up thousands of European candidates for jihad. After joining London, they traveled to Pakistan, where they were welcomed in a safe house in Peshawar before being sent in Kabul or Jalalabad. They stayed there during 1 or several months for a military training. Then they were sent back to their home country to export the jihad. They took advantage to be viewed as a charismatic figure to recruit young followers or to set up new logistical cells. Some were also involved in terrorist plots. Apart from Afghanistan, Bosnia, Kosovo, Chechnya, Iraq, and more recently Syria, as well as in less proportions the African Sahel area played and still plays the same role. That's the reason why we have to pay a great attention of the evolution of Islamic cell in Syria, but also in Africa, especially in Egypt, in Libya, and Tunisia, because it's still a powerful engine to fuel the jihadi feeling and is a radicalization process as well to export the terrorist violence in our countries. Other main feature of the Islamic organization or network linked to Al-Qaeda is their pragmatisms and, above all, their high ability to be responsive to all the social, political, or geopolitical factors or events which they could manipulate or derive a benefit from. Such ability provides them with an actual operational advantage, all the more that the reactions of these terrorist organizations are sometimes misunderstood or not properly analyzed. Another question which is a matter of discussion is the operational role of Central Al-Qaeda in 2013. What are nowadays the respective role and operational relationship between Central Al-Qaeda and its local associates? Do we are facing a global and local jihad? These questions are not only academic issue. They have an operational incidence in the counter-terrorism strategy implemented by states. According to minority opinion, Al-Qaeda and more globally the terrorist threat is declining and the process to end. On the other side, academic and officials stated that despite the death of Osama bin Laden, Central Al-Qaeda still plays a central role in the global jihad, including in the planification of terrorist operations at a large scale. I think that the first analysis is inaccurate and the second doesn't meet the reality of the field. Central Al-Qaeda is no longer a central operational structure with the ability to conceive a global jihad strategy and to order its affiliate to execute its plan at a local level. Moreover, it's not relevant to oppose global jihad and to local jihad because local networks can have a global jihad agenda. Two examples from terrorist cases I have personally investigated. First, the Ressam case, better known in the United States as the Millennium Bomber. The arrest in France of two couriers involved in counterfeit Moroccan passport trafficking in 1996 allows the French counter services, the DST, to uncover a worldwide Islamist network connected to Al-Qaeda, aiming at carrying out a terrorist bombing in the United States. The terrorist cell was located in Canada, but its members have been supported by different logistical bases over the world, and especially an NGO in Istanbul called IHH, this Turkish foundation linked to Al-Qaeda, will be involved in May 2010 in the Gaza Flotilla operations. In 1999, material evidence of the plot was seized in Montreal. 2 months later, Ahmed Ressan were arrested by chance near Seattle while he was carrying out in the boot of his car several pounds of explosive materials and a fuse and a remote control system. The target was the Los Angeles airport. Ahmed Ressam has been trained in 1998 in the Al-Qaeda camp in Afghanistan. He met top figures of Al-Qaeda, especially Abu Zubaydah, who asked him to do something against the US. But all the plot has been conceived and achieved at the local level. The second case in 2005, investigation on the terrorist activities in France of several terrorist cells belonging to the Moroccan Islamic fighting groups involved in the marauding bombing in 2004 have brought to light that a French convert with a former Bosnian jihadist have joined sleeping cell in the Lashkar-e-Taiba in Japan, which were involved to plan a terrorist attack in Tokyo. Al-Qaeda Center was not conceived. Al-Qaeda was not conceived by this. Al-Qaeda Center was not concerned, by this project and has never been in the loop. However, such a terrorist plan conceived at the local level resorted to a global jihad agenda. Even the Al-Qaeda conference call in August between Al-Qaeda senior leaders and representatives of several regional branches, which has prompted the United States government as well as European countries to close embassies throughout the Middle East, doesn't mean that Ayman al-Zawahiri took the lead in planning terrorist operations to be carried out by local franchises. The reality seems to be much more complex. According to information released by the US media, this conversation between more than 20 top Al-Qaeda militants is the result of a virtual meeting through a secure internet messaging system and the use of a courier captured in Yemen with help from CIA. As regard to the appointment of Nasser al-Waishi by Zawahiri, its operational impact remains unclear because Al-Qaeda's regional branches and other groups affiliates to it are autonomous and carry out their own strategy. However, this appointment might be a reminder of their pledge to allegiance to Al-Qaeda Central, which, according to the Arabic tradition, means that they have to respect the ideological legacy of bin Laden and its central influence without actual operational incidents. To conclude, I would like to make a very brief overview of the Sahel zone, Syria, in terms of terrorist threat. The recent activity in Africa, especially in the Sahel region, seems to have been overshadowed by Sahel regions. In the Sahel region, seems to be overshadowed by the terrorist alert in Yemen and the surge of violence in Iraq. And without a swift and strong military reaction from France, backed by African forces, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb would have succeeded to create a new Taliban regime in the Sahel at the gates of Europe. In 2011, after the collapse of the Gaddafi regime, AQIM and the criminal gangs roaming the desert have looted the huge stockpile of arms and ammunition left in open barracks by the regime. A Tuareg incorporated by Gaddafi in its army left Libya and flew to their motherland in the north of Mali, where they founded the Azawad National Liberation Movement. Better trained, armed, and more experienced, they defeated the Malian army and took the control of the main cities, but Al-Qaeda and its affiliates succeeded to expel the Tuareg from their area and overran all the north of Mali. In the fall of 2012, EQIM, but also the Tawhid and Jihad group in West Africa, Mujao, Ansardin and Islamic Tuareg movement, which is in fact the proxy of EQIM, have taken advantage of the loose governance of the central government and the wait-and-see policy of the international community to expand their influence in Mali. In the beginning of 2013, January, EQIM and its allies decided to rush straight to the south with the intention to take over the capital and to establish a Taliban regime. Such a situation, if it has been occurred, would have destabilized all the strategic regions, this strategic region. For the first time, after the collapse of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, a branch of Al-Qaeda would have set up an Islamic State very close to Europe. A Malian Islamist government run by EQIM would have been an extraordinary and unexpected opportunity for this branch of Al-Qaeda to strengthen its power, because it would have been able to establish a springboard to export the jihad in Europe and beyond. On January 11th, the Islamic offensive was halted by the French Air Force, and the French army succeeded, backed by the African troops, denied jihadist territorial control over the northern Mali and ousted EQIM from his stronghold. More than 600 jihadists were killed, the others were dispersed throughout the neighboring country, especially Libya. However, the terrorist threat have not been quelled, and terror spread over Africa. Several terrorist attacks have been carried out in January against the gas facility operating by Sonatrach and British Petroleum in Algeria, and in May and June in Niger. EQIM and the Mujao have set up operational links with the Ansar al-Sharia organization in Libya and the Boko Haram group in Nigeria, and even with the Somalian Shebab. Taking advantage of this gray zone stretching from the Horn of Africa till the Western Africa, they have expanded their influence and their power and set up opportunistic connection with organized crime groups involved in drug traffickings. Without any doubt, this terrorist operation in Western Africa has a strategic dimensions. However, they have been planned and carried out at a local level without the intervention of Al-Qaeda Central. So I believe that the distinctions of the global and locals jihad is not relevant conceptions and should not be, and the conception be opposed. Thank you.